Oh, hey, Christopher, in both cases you posted on the early side, and I've reviewed these works in the assignment discussion, so I'm going to send you there for my comments, okay? Well, hi, Dana. We've already taken a look at your assignment 2 in depth, so here I'll focus on assignment 3. Um, well, there are a variety of subjects here, and they don't all seem to be inhabiting the same space, which makes it just a little tricky for me to pick apart. Um, if I remember correctly, it was Abram who also had a shadow cast from a floating subject. That would be a special situation. You might want to do a little research on the matter. When I look at your dragonfly, it's suggesting to me that you could benefit from regarding a photo of a dragonfly. In my experience, their bodies are very straight and rigid, and you might find that the eyes aren't centered in the head when you see the bug from this side. In fact, they might have really big eyes too. With your street lamp, I'm just wondering about a cast shadow, which direction a cast shadow would fall in. With a street lamp, another possibility is to have a nighttime scene and have the lamp illuminating the scene. Well, hi, Christina. We've talked about your assignment 2 work already, so here I was going to focus on assignment 3. And while I haven't gone over all your guidelines to check every last one of them, my impression is that you're really getting things to work for you with 2-point perspective and the perspective for cast shadows. A couple of things. I'm looking at your objects on the right sides of these drawings. Um, if that jar, that sort of vase, is full of liquid, is there variation in the value of the liquid we can see through the transparent glass? And then, I think that's a perfume bottle on bottom right. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe that's made of glass too. Here, it almost looks like we've got like a shop spritzer, or something that might be made of metal and be more cold, hard, and straight edged than what I think a perfume bottle would be. So Sarah, I lately take a look at your assignment 3, and we'll concentrate on assignment 2 here. I do like the look of the mushroom that I see there, and I encourage you to study up on what the interior of a mushroom looks like. I think you'll find that there are sort of gills on the underside. I'll mention along the lines of stories and storybooks, Beatrix Potter in her youth was someone who was very fascinated by fungi, and actually did a research study on the subject, to some extent to her mother's dismay, because it didn't seem like a very ladylike thing in her mother's eyes to pursue. I'm going to remark that this house of cards idea, I believe I'm seeing middle left here, would be a great thing to do with perspective. Well, hi, Nicole. It's nice to see your ideas for assignment 2 with shadowing added. I want you to take a look at a couple of things with regard to the anatomy. In the top right one, I want you to check the bony ankle on the straight leg. And also think about how the legs are nearer to us in this pose than the upper body, so they can be enlarged. Now, with a standing figure, I'd like you to think about the hip. I'd like you to think about how the femur, extends up through the upper leg and joins with the pelvic bone, just to give that pose a little more substance. Now, your work for assignment 3 is just beautiful. A couple of things I think you can revisit, perhaps here, or maybe when you use any of these in another drawing, as we're suggesting. With the sort of canister, top left, um, maybe that's glass. I'm thinking that's glass. I observed that its shadow is very defined, and I like to encourage you to let the shadow be more translucent, less focused, so that we can see it as what it is, a shadow, and distinguish it well from the object itself. Now, with the, I think that's a rectangular planter, I want you to consider the footprint of this form. I'm thinking that if I looked at it from overhead, it would be rectangular, and it would be longer in the direction that's perpendicular to the picture plane. and the footprint of it, the way it's been drawn, isn't quite suggesting that. Well, hi, Abram. Looking at your assignment too, I see that you're saying that these are some things that will be pictured in your final project in week 6. And you know what most people are doing is they're working out different possibilities for the total composition in that assignment. That's kind of what's being asked for. Um, so now on to assignment 3. I can see you've spent a lot of time on this, and I love the cast shadows of the magically floating objects like the wagon wheel and quarter. You know, taking a look at that axe, I can see a lot of care was taken to analyze it, but I'm wondering about the result. Is the result working? For instance, the axe head, is it looking rigid, made of metal, sharp? You know, it seems a little like it's bending slightly, like a rubber spatula might. You know, I'm just going to say this little picture is drawn very nicely, like the way you've analyzed its bulk and also drawn the cast shadow. Well, hi, Luz. I think we've taken a look at your assignment 2 before and even at the prelim stage of assignment 3. And I love the delicacy with which you've drawn the shadows in. However, I don't see evidence that you've been using light VP and the shadow VP to plot out your shadows, which is harder with some of these types of subjects, I will grant you. Now, I'm looking at this doorway and thinking, I wonder where her ruler is. Well, Claybird, I've talked about both of these drawings and assignments, and I'm going to refer you there, and I'm going to mention to everybody that the notes I've written for Claybird about drawing cylindrical forms and the picture attachment there would be good for everybody to look over. This is what I consider to be a pretty important lesson that is kind of hard to get if you're new to drawing. Why, Belinda, you know, I've already taken a close look at your assignment too. Your thumbnail in the top right is the one that I favor, and reminds me a little bit of a building from a De Chirico painting, or maybe even that crazy library by Will Alsop in South London, near to where I used to live. Now, looking at your assignment 3, one thing I want to say is nice presentation. You've done a good job presenting your works here this week. Um, I'm looking at the top left thumbnail, and I'm thinking about what I was saying to Sarah in the discussion. I took a look at her teacup, and I'd like you to go and read that and take a look at the picture attachment I made for her. I can see in these you're working with shadows, but it also occurs to me that the objects are somewhat large in the compositions so that it's not possible to fit the shadow and light VPs or maybe even the horizon in there. With the bottom left one, golly, I'm going to be looking in that assignment discussion to see if you've given us some notes about what's pictured there. I'm not sure what it is just looking at it here. Hello, Shalyn. You know, I want to make sure that you understand the shadow perspective idea, and I would skip 2-point perspective VPs with these sorts of subjects for the moment, okay? What I want you to focus on is the shadow VP, and there ought to be just one if all the objects are in the same space. So let's make it simple and have one shadow VP on the horizon someplace, and directly above it, over the horizon, straight above, is a light VP. That should be on your page. Mark it. Now, with your shapes, with your forms, extend lines from the shadow VP on the horizon to the bottom edges and beyond. Then, from your light VP, extend lines to the top edges and beyond until your lines intersect with the shadow VP lines, and that plots the shape of your shadow. Now, let's see. You could stand to take a look at the information I was sharing with Claybert in the discussion. I want you to download the picture I attached there and study what I'm saying about how cylindrical forms will have bottom edges that look more curved than their top edges.